Hello everyone, so here is our first video for chapter 3, okay? Chapter 3 is all about parallel and perpendicular lines, and if you want to get a deeper understanding of what we're going to be talking about in chapter 3, there is this page on Schoology. First we're going to just talk about pairs of lines and angles, the relationship between lines and angles. Then we're going to start to write proofs again in chapter 3. These proofs are going to be about parallel and perpendicular lines. And then we are going to end it with some algebra, writing equations of parallel and perpendicular lines. So that is the topic for chapter 3. It is one of my favorite chapters here, so it is going to be awesome, okay? Let's get started talking about 3.1, okay? So we are going to talk about these first two objectives, identifying relationships between figures in space and identifying parallel and perpendicular lines. The next objective is going to be touched on in the next 3.1 video. So this is just split up into two little videos. Hopefully keep on watching and go to the next one because that's how you're going to get all of these objectives to be able to do all three of these things. Tons of vocab in this chapter, okay? So get those flashcards ready. A lot of new terms, right? These are very unfamiliar to us. Transversal, what the heck is that? You know, alternate interior angles, oh boy. Lots of things for us to define, and we want to make sure we are ready and going to use them. We're going to use them all through chapter 3, guys. So we want to make sure we start off strong and start with a good understanding. So let's talk about some of these vocabulary words. Starting off, parallel lines should be pretty familiar to us, right? Parallel lines are coplanar lines that do not intersect, okay? We know that parallel lines, they have the same slope, okay? They're never going to intersect, and they have to be on the same plane, okay? Coplanar, remember that definition. Our symbol, math people don't like writing out parallel lines every single time, so that's why we are using that little symbol. It's two vertical lines closely together, and it is read is parallel to. So here's an example. Line AE, which is right here, is parallel to line BF. Okay, and that looks correct on our diagram. They are parallel. I do want to note something else here, guys. Notice these little arrows right here. See that? There's a little arrow here and a matching one over here. That's representing that these lines are parallel. So those are a bigger version of those arrows. If we see that, again, it's a notation on a diagram that two lines are parallel. You can see them again up here. Those double arrows mean that line AD is parallel to line BC, okay? So if we ever see that, we know that we have parallel lines. The next vocab word, let's talk about perpendicular lines. We touched on this in chapter 2. And we are going to look at the definition. So perpendicular lines, two lines that intersect at a 90-degree angle. We've done this one before, right? The symbol might be new for us. The symbol is like this upside down T, okay? That's representing that we have perpendicular lines, and that's how we would read it. I would read this example as line AE is perpendicular to line EF, okay? And those are the two lines that they were talking about in our diagram. You can use that notation. We've seen that. It's that little square in the corner of two lines that are intersecting at a 90-degree angle. Okay, those are perpendicular lines. The next new vocab word is called skew lines. So skew lines are lines that literally have nothing in common. They would never be friends, okay? They are skew lines. Two lines that are, listen to this, they're not on the same plane, they are not parallel, and they do not intersect. They are nowhere near each other. Skew lines, nowhere near each other, these guys. They happen in 3D places because they're not on the same plane, so they're nowhere near each other. And an example, check out in our diagram, line AB and CG are skew lines. Notice they are completely on opposite sides of the diagram, which means they're not on the same plane. They are not parallel. Look, they don't have the same slope, and they're never going to intersect, okay? Because they're not on the same plane, so they will never be intersecting. This one's like in the front right, of the cube, and this is in the back of the cube. So they will never intersect. Skew lines, they are the worst type of lines. They have nothing in common. Okay, and the last vocab word we're going to talk about are parallel planes. Okay, parallel planes are very similar to parallel lines. They are planes that do not intersect. Okay, they are planes that are in the same direction. So let's check out this example. Plane ABCD, which is this one right here, plane ABCD, and plane EFGH are parallel planes. Guys, think about it being like the floor and the ceiling of a room, okay? They are never intersecting. The floor never intersects the ceiling, okay? Or the two walls that are opposite each other. They are never intersecting. They are planes. They are surfaces. Okay, so what we need to be able to do with all of these definitions are answer some questions. Okay, so that's what we want to practice in this example. We're going to use this diagram. We'll just check it out here. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 sides. So I have a pentagon on the top and the bottom, and these rectangles to connect the surfaces on the top and the bottom. Okay, and points that label at all the vertices. So we're going to answer these questions. Which segment is parallel to segment EJ and contains point C? And guys, notice what I just did. I'm very visual. I want to highlight that on the diagram. Okay? What segment, give me another segment that is parallel to EJ and contains point C? Well, what about segment CA? Right? Segment CA includes point C and is parallel to EJ. Wonderful. Okay, let's check out another question. Explain why segment KF and DI are not skew. Why are they not skew? Check back at our definition for skew. What do they have in common? Are these two lines parallel? Look at those green lines. Yep, they are parallel lines, which means they're not skew. They have something in common. They're parallel, okay? Which means they are not skew. So let's talk about segments that are skew. What segments have nothing at all in common? What about segment FJ back there and segment CD up here? Totally different planes. They're never going to intersect, so they are skew. Okay, wonderful. Let's get rid of some of these highlights so I can keep drawing on this. Another question here. What is a pair of parallel planes? Let's look at parallel planes now. Let's check out, what do we think about plane KED? That would give me this plane. And think about what plane is parallel to the top of this, or the front of this pentagon shape. What about back here, right? Plane FJI. Remember, we can name planes with 3 points on the plane, okay? Those planes are parallel. What about two segments parallel to that plane KED? So what is another two segments that are parallel to this plane KED? Check out line segment FJ and line segment JI, also on that plane that we kind of just talked about here. If it's on that plane, they are parallel to the plane, segments FJ and JI. And the last one we want to practice is name two perpendicular segments. So segments that are perpendicular, check out here, guys. Let's look at segments KF and KE right here. They would form a 90-degree angle right there on the side touching this front plane. Okay, and guys, these aren't the only answers. There's a variety of answers for this question because there's so many points on here. These are just some possible solutions. Okay, and we'll get the hang of these, identifying where I have points and parallel lines and perpendicular lines all intersecting. We got this. All right, the last example that we're going to look at here, again, let's talk about parallel and perpendicular lines. We want to be able to identify a pair of parallel lines. So check out my diagram. Where do I have parallel lines? Where do I have that marking that I showed you? Right? Check out these arrows right here. Notice those? Hopefully you notice those right away to tell me that line AB is perpendicular to line CD. And that's my answer. And notice there's that notation. Name a pair of perpendicular lines. Well, what in this diagram tells me I have perpendicular lines? That little square in the corner there tells me that line AB is perpendicular to line AC. Notice my notation, guys. It has to be complete. It's a line, right? So I need to have that bar with two arrows on the top of it. And then the last question wants me to determine whether line AB is perpendicular to line BC. Are those two lines, and trace over it, right guys? It's very easy to tell once you've just trace over it, change the color so you can focus on those two lines. Are they perpendicular? Nope, right? They are not perpendicular because in order to be perpendicular, we need to intersect at 90 degrees. Check out how they intersect. I have an obtuse and acute angle. It is not a right angle. Okay, guys? So first video in 3.1. Stay tuned. Click on the next video so you guys can learn about a final new vocab word for this section. You guys rock. Great work.